Good morning from beautiful Brisbane, Australia. Welcome, Conscious Warriors. It's Friday down under. How are you today? It's great to be here with you. And I want to share a really special story with you this morning. And it's something that happened in my life, but it's also something that one of the beautiful young people who regard me as a second mum brought to me last night to ask questions about, and it's about relationships. And I thought, this is really raw and really real about what happens in the world in relationships. And it's also about how we have a raft of information available to us, but it's not quite hitting the spot when it comes to relationships. So I actually learnt this information quite a number of years ago now. And John Bradshaw was one of the first people that I used to listen to. And those in America will know who John Bradshaw is. But before we go on, if you're here on Facebook, say g'day. And if you're here for the first time, welcome. It's great to have you join our wonderful community. Now, if you're here on YouTube, remember to hit subscribe to know when the latest video is out. And thank you all. It's been great for all the comments and feedback that you get. Now, with relationships, we can have all the information in the world, but our own level of woundedness is going to be where we meet someone at. So we have to be aware of our woundedness before we go into a relationship in order that we are conscious of what could possibly happen, what outcomes are, etc., etc. Now, long time ago, just yesterday really, I kid, my kids are adults, but when I married their dad, we had no idea about this information. And at the end of our relationship, because I was looking for answers for a lot of years, and John Bradshaw gave me this absolute gem of information. And he said that people can change their behaviour, but if they're not changing at a heart level, then their actual behaviour won't change long term. So when things were challenging with my then husband, Stuart, he said to me, look, his anger was just out of control. And he said to me, look, I will get help, etc., etc. I said, great, I'm happy to stay. If you're going to get help, great, let's do this. Because I was doing my work for a number of years. And but I also knew that the likelihood of him doing that and changing wasn't high, simply because of who he was. Now, I gave it 12 months. I knew that he was modifying his behaviour. So really what was happening was he was stuffing the anger down and pretending to be good and happy and whole and etc., etc. And at the end of 12 months, we had a celebration because he was cancer-free, and it was great. I threw a little surprise party for him. And then 4 weeks later, he walked in the back door. There were some plastic bags on the ground, not even in anyone's road. They were under the table because the cats were playing with them from when I had done the shopping. And he just lost it over plastic bags. He just went through the roof about plastic bags being on the floor, and I just went, here comes the anger, watch. And sure enough, it started on the family again. Now, that's hard, and it was hard for him too. I know it was hard. So there's no blame, but I did have to leave because I had a bigger vision that our children wouldn't be raised to know that that was acceptable. And last night, I got an actual message from one of the young people that regard me as a second mum, and they were asking me about this relationship they're in, and they were saying that they're being driven crazy and with jealousy, and it's consuming them, and she's trying to control someone who's basically in another country, and what could she do? So I asked a few questions about what the other person was doing in the relationship. And basically, he already had a habit of how he treated women and how he looked at women. Now, there's no judgment, it just is what it is, okay? So he had an Instagram account full of half-naked women. He'd messaged his ex-girlfriend asking, lots of different questions when he was supposedly in developing a relationship with her and so on. And I said to her, everything happens at a heart level. So people are looking for the mental level, they're not looking at the heart level. So even if she says, I don't like this, change your behaviour, and he changes his behaviour, then he's only modifying his behaviour, okay, because he's not going and dealing with the wounds that have him behaving in a way that is disrespectful to women. And I said to her, yes, you need to do your own work too. I said, but you also need to ask some pretty big questions around this. And so I went, you know what? We all need to ask some pretty big questions around relationships, and we all need to know what those questions are, so that whether we're single, whether we're married, or anything in between, we need to be willing to ask some really hard questions of ourselves. So irrespective of what he's doing or she's doing, we actually have to ask really hard questions of ourselves. And one of them is, am I modifying my behaviour and it's making me miserable instead of going and dealing with my heart stuff? Good morning, Ali. Oh, I'm sorry, it's freezing there. I was thinking this morning, I really need to move somewhere when summer hits Queensland. Not freezing, but yeah, I've got to find, it's crazy. We were so hot last night at bedtime, yeah. Anyhow, so if we look at relationships from the perspective of we attract each other at our level of woundedness, we then have to begin to ask a question: where do I abandon myself? So where do I put myself aside and start people pleasing and taking care of somebody else and expecting them to behave in a particular manner? And we've got to ask these tough questions. And when we've had trauma in our lives, we will do this. Now, it doesn't mean you can't have a relationship where both of you are growing through the woundedness, but that's only going to happen if both of you are conscious of the woundedness and you're seeking to keep growing through that. Does that make sense? So you've got to build this conscious awareness of what's happening internally for you. Now, with complex PTSD, we've never known how to do that because our childhood was so traumatic. There's so much we missed in even seeing in relationships that we need to develop these skills for ourselves as well. Another question we can ask is, where are they struggling to love themselves? And you don't even have to go as deep as love. Where do they struggle to have compassion for themselves? And where do we struggle to have compassion for ourselves? And I love my kids because they call me on anything. And my daughter did last night. She said, Mum, you're too hard on yourself. And I went, oh my goodness. We need people who say that so that we develop a level of compassion for ourselves. All right? And I went, I didn't even realise I was doing it. So when we have people around us that do that, then we can say, okay, that's the next place I need to show compassion to myself. And then I will show compassion to others as well. But if we're going to have a relationship with someone, we want to know that they're working on their stuff and asking themselves the really, deeper questions. And an even deeper question than the compassion and love is, where are we struggling to accept the love of God in our hearts? It's a question, okay? So with complex PTSD and being people pleasers, we can abandon ourselves and take care of other people, all right? So part of our people pleasing routine is that we put the priority of taking care of other people above taking care of or being conscious of, are we abandoning ourselves? are we doing, where's all of it coming from? Why are we doing what we're doing? All right, so it's building that conscious awareness of it. And we have to do it constantly, as in life is ever changing, and if we're growing, then we're going to have to keep asking the hard questions to keep ourselves in check as well. We need to ask, are we owning our own feelings of worthlessness, unlovableness, and so on? Do we own it and say, that's how I'm feeling, and what can I do about, what's my one next step to change that up? Are we saying what we need instead of expecting that everybody else should know what we need? Oh my goodness, I can't tell you. I just used to so live in that world. I really did. I'm so glad I don't anymore. And it's a process, but it's worth it. And sometimes we can feel really afraid to ask for what we need, but it's worth it. Okay. Have we built an awareness around when we can recognize another person's inner emptiness? If you ever find yourself saying, but I can see their potential, I'm going to give you a slap on the wrist. Because that's what I did too. I could see someone's inner emptiness, didn't have the words for it, but I didn't know that just because I could see their potential doesn't mean they'd live up to it. The question then has to become, are they doing anything to address their inner emptiness? Okay, we've got to be willing to ask the questions. And as long as we're abandoning ourselves, we will attract somebody who is abandoning themselves, okay? We need to be willing to look at our false beliefs, okay? We need to be willing to examine our childhood trauma or wounding, and remember, emotional neglect can be part of that wounding. Pardon me, we need to address our unspoken feelings. And part of complex PTSD recovery is us learning to be willing to start to communicate about how we're feeling. And it doesn't mean we want the other person to address how we're feeling. We've just got to learn to communicate about it in order that we get all that energy up and out, and then we can see what is our one next step. Have we built an awareness around our subconscious coping mechanisms? So when stress comes, are we aware of what the subconscious brings up for us emotionally and behaviourally in order that we can begin to address it and turn it around? I know there's lots of questions, and the sheet will be up in the free professional resources later today. I hope some of this helps, and I want you to know that it's better for us to be going into a relationship when our heart's full and overflowing, and having somebody else who's full and overflowing and working on our stuff. We're like the onion. It's just layer after layer. But being proactive is really, really helpful. Okay, have a great Friday. Have a wonderful weekend. And remember, in group, we're going to have a party next week because we reached 1,000 members. We're actually over it now. And there'll be prizes and fun and laughter, and all the admins are putting it together. So come along and join us. I look forward to seeing you there. Bye for now.